So, got a lot to talk about today. So we're what a little under a year removed from Talkin Ugly Truth, Tellin Pretty Lies. What's the reaction of fans thus far now that we've had months and months of this out and fellow colleagues to the album?
Yeah, I mean, so far it's by far been the most well received of my records, of my solo records, it's interesting because I basically began this aspect of my career coming up on 13 years ago when my wife Donna passed away, and so it's been an ongoing progression of me, initially writing about that experience and touring and playing around. And so, it continues to grow, continues to spread, and it's all very encouraging for me and interesting at the same time. And as it applies to the record, these days when you put a record out, it's a different phenomena into how you approach it. So with this record, I released a couple of songs with videos before the album actually came out, and now I'm in the process of, once the album came out, releasing the title track as the single with a video. It's got over 2.5 million views on that video. Um, I released another song after that, and now on March 1st, to celebrate the anniversary of the album, I'm releasing another song from the album with a video.
Good.
So, you know, that's how you got to roll at these days. You got to keep active. You got to stay in the mix and keep all the algorithms jumping.
Yeah, it's very much a thing. Is there any song that really maybe I don't want to I mean maybe say surprisingly got a reaction from people, or is it one that really stood out? Most were talking about like, yeah, I really like this, or wow, that was for whatever reason.
Well, I would say that the title track has gotten the most reaction, and surprising in the way that I basically put that song on the album because it was going to be the title of the album. So I had no preconception of how the production was going to work on it. Um, as with all my songs, I based them off of a guitar, vocal, acoustic guitar, vocal, and then build the track up around it. And Ken Lewis, who produced this record, it was my first. He produced, 95% of the album, and it was my first really overall collaboration with him as producer, and we had a great rapport. Most of the record I recorded in Milan, my guitar and my vocals and whatever other harmonies or synth parts that I would come up with, and I would ship them off to him in Ohio, and then the rhythm section was basically out of New York, and so we worked in this long distance way, um, but Ken and I both had very clear direction and vision of how we wanted this record to go, and it worked really well. So when Talking Ugly Truth came out, it seemed to really bring the focus to that song, and it spread to the album. And what it's done is it's reinvigorated the rest of these records that I put out. So, I can post videos that I did 3 years ago on songs that completely got overlooked by people. And now that I have an expanded base of people looking at me, they're, coming in contact and recognizing these songs that were even a few years old now. So it's been an interesting process anyway.
Um, the one that stood out the most to me is the one that sonically I think stands out the most, navigating the unforeseen. How did that come about?
That came over, interesting. That came about. I wrote this piece, and I just basically tapped it out on my couch and my iPhone, and it's basically a spoken word piece. And I was like, yeah, this is all it needs to be, and so sonically, it's an iPhone recording, and but it gets the message across. It's interesting with a lot. I'm so lyric heavy in terms of what I have to say and how I say it. My emphasis leans more on the lyric side. So it's always an interesting phenomena for me to, when producing a song or a record, not to let the production get in the way of the lyric. And so it's interesting that you pick on navigating the unforeseen, because there's basically nothing getting in the way of the lyric there.
Yeah, I could even sense like at the beginning the scuff against the microphone. I'm like, I've got an iPhone as well, so I know the
Yeah,
sound. If you record a voice memo, you get the
yeah, yeah.
sound going on. I'm like, I'm thinking, was this an idea that popped up in the middle of the night or something like that? I mean, it stands. It's one of the most different sounding songs I hear on any album that you hear, because most people don't put on what amounts to a voice memo on an
Yeah,
album.
exactly. And the thing is, with anything, you want to capture the emotion of what is being said, and I think that when I put it down, it wasn't with the intention of it being the recording that was going to go on the record, but I recognized that it was all that it needed.
Valerie Simpson. Oh, keep going.
No, and I was especially with a topic as heavy as navigating the unforeseen.
Right. Exactly. Well, it had an emotional heft to it, even for being as simple as it was, and maybe that's the reason why. Um,
Yeah.
as mentioning, Valerie Simpson was a guest on this. Were there any other musicians that, I guess, I mean, however one wants to say, of note, that you pondered or maybe could have had on this project?
Well, I think the musicians that are on this record are musicians of
Right.
note,
Yeah.
and that in that like the drummer on Under the Gun is James Cruz. He's played with every Jackson Brown and endless. Kevin
Right.
McCormick, the bass player, also
Right.
out of the Jackson Brown camp. Was the original producer of Melissa Etheridge, produced all her original records. So all these guys that we use are, you know, incredible musicians in their own right, and certainly Randy Ray Mitchell, who is my, primary guitarist and has been with me for a long time, was with Donna for 30 years, you know, has played on all kinds of records forever. So in terms of wishing, no, I don't, I basically, and Ken Lewis as a producer, just won the Grammy for producing In the Heights, the Broadway musical for Alicia Keys. So, he's a very credible guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the Valerie Simpson thing was certainly a thrill for me. I consider her one of the, songwriters of our generation. And for her to agree to do this with me on a song that I wrote, to say, no, I love the song, I'm happy to do it. And we specifically produced it in a way that was pretty stark, just me on acoustic guitar, Valerie on piano, a bass and a drum, and our vocals, so it was fun. It was great doing the video for that with her. We did it at her club in Manhattan. Um, so that was great also. So Yeah, no, I pretty much got all the wishes that I wanted on this record, you know.
You broke into the liner notes, which is something I'll usually do if I look up Discogs or something. I'm always curious who played, who's got the connections going back. Like, okay, oh, they played on this thing, and they're playing with on this one. That's really cool. Is there, and you went through the list of the instrumentalists as well. Is there an instrumentalist that you're like, I really love to have them play on an album, and it's never the stars haven't aligned, but you'd love to have them in the studio with you.
Ah, hmm. Well, I mean, one guy that I think about uh, using is Snuffy Walden. Uh, Now, Snuffy, I have a long history with him. He was the guitarist in the Brooklyn Dreams back in the late '70s. He went on to do all the music for the Wonder Years and numerous TV shows. And he's just he's a Texas blues guitarist. They have their own distinct way of he's out of the Stevie Ray Vaughan camp, let's say. So it all comes down to having the right song for the right guy, and so I can't say I wish there was somebody. I haven't come up against that yet to where there was somebody that I wish for and haven't. But I know in the back of my mind, I keep thinking I want to use Snuffy on something again, and so hopefully in something forthcoming, uh, I'll be able to do that.
Well, and speaking of Brooklyn Dreams, could there ever be a mid 2020s era project under the name, under the umbrella of Brooklyn Dreams ever again?
Uh, I would never say no. Joe Bean Esposito and Eddie Hoganson, my partners in the Brooklyn Dreams, remain two of my best friends. I speak to them both a couple of times a week. Um, I'm writing a song with Joe right now. We've been going back and forth on it. It's probably for one of his projects. Um, there's a song on Talkin Ugly Truth called "Make the World Go Away," which I wrote, and Joe did a version of it on his last project. So, yeah, it's highly likely. I won't say it's highly likely. It's very possible that we would do something. It's really a matter of time and logistics. At this point in our lives, we live in three different places. We all have separate things going on, and but funnily enough, there's a movie out called The Apprentice right now, which is a movie about Donald Trump in his personality and character in the late '70s, and there's a Brooklyn Dream song that they use in that film that is right at the beginning of the film and gets a really big feature, uh, and it's called Street Man. And it's a song that we originally wrote for another movie back in 1978. There was a movie starring David Cassidy of all people, and it was Police Story, uh, and it was an NBC TV movie. And we got hired. We wrote two songs for that movie: "Street Man" and another song called "Touching in the Dark." So I don't know how they found "Street Man" for the Donald Trump thing, but you know, you, you never know how these things happen.
How do you find out that like, wait a minute, your song from 46, 47, what the moment was that you found, how do you find out, oh, it's going to be in a movie right now and it's good. This is like a nationally distributed, this is a bigger thing. How do you find
Well,
out about that?
it just comes to I have a guy who represents my publishing, the administration for my publishing, and he gets an email or a call, and it happened twice. There was another song. I don't know if you're familiar with Kenny Vance and the Planetones, but the Planetones was a band that was created for a movie called American Hot Wax. So Joe, Eddie, and myself and Kenny portrayed this band, the Planetones, in this movie, American Hot Wax. And at some point in the 90s, Kenny, reconfigured it and started touring and playing around it. And a number of years ago, he wanted to do a Christmas album. So he and I got together with Johnny Gale, who is the guitarist that works with him, who's also a tremendous musician. And we wrote this song called Doo-Wop Christmas. And somehow there was a movie with Jason Bateman that was released at Christmas time this year called Carry On. And they're using Doo-Wop Christmas in their movie. And, so it goes to my philosophy, and this is what I've learned throughout my career. Your job is to do the best you can, keep showing up, have a vision, have a goal, but you can never, my experience is that these things happen out of the left or out of the right. It's never like straight ahead where you're going and where you think you're going. Yeah, you're moving in that direction, but there's a lot of serendipity, and it's usually from where you least expect it.
A little serendipity. You've told the story about how Starting Over Again ends up with Dolly Parton. And the thing that most intrigued me was like, wow, that was a #1 country hit. And Dolly had a ton of #1s, and that's one of them. Speaking of discovering something, going back to 1980, the spring of 80, do you recall finding out from whomever or however that, oh, that song you and Donna wrote is now the #1 country song in America thanks to Dolly Parton?
Yeah, I mean, I vividly remember getting the call about Dolly recording the song. When it went to #1, what I remember most about it going to #1 is I was inundated with people from Nashville saying, "Move to Nashville, move to Nashville, move to Nashville," and at the time, it wasn't possible. But I ultimately did move to Nashville back in the I don't know, 93 or something like that. And ultimately, Reba re-recorded the song, made it the title track of her album, and it didn't go to #1, but it had a relatively good chart success for Reba as well. So who knows?
Serendipity, once again.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
Compare, if you will, and we'll compare that era to current era, but in terms of you recording a solo album. And you kind of described a little bit of the current era recording over in Milan. Let's go to your first solo album. So go back to Fugitive Kind. What was the process like? You've already worked with Brooklyn Dreams. You've already been part of several big hits going to tighter. Yes, that's all happened. But now you're going in as a solo act to record. Compare that to fast forward to the 2020s and doing this after a whole career. Compare the two.
We had done 4 albums with Brooklyn Dreams. And Jimmy Einer, who was the guy that signed us originally. He had started a label in 76 or something like that called Millennium Records. And he signed us. We were the first act as Brooklyn Dreams signed to Millennium Records in 1977. And we, somewhere along the way, our contract got bought out by Casablanca Records. That's another whole story of the politics of how and why that happened. So when the situation with Casablanca was up and Eddie had decided to move back to Brooklyn, I was now married to Donna, and Brooklyn Dreams was dissolving. Jimmy Einer again called me up and said, "Would you like to make a solo album?" And it's not something that, I mean, it was something that in the back of my mind I wanted to do. Had and this just crystallized it to where I said, okay, and uh, and it was probably prefaced by him saying to me, Bruce, do you have any songs? So Jimmy, who was, I don't know if you know Jimmy, he produced the Raspberries, he produced all the big Eric Carmen stuff. I mean, great guy, great talent, great producer. So you know, he starts with, do you have any songs? And so I say, yeah, I have these songs. And I send him The Fugitive Kind and a couple of the songs on that record. And as a result of that, he said, do you want to make a solo album? And I said, okay, and we recorded the album in New Jersey. Again, another name I'll throw out there is Tony Camillo. Tony Camillo was also a great producer, produced Gladys Knight and the Pips. All the big Gladys Knight songs Tony produced. So Tony had a studio in New Jersey. I moved to New Jersey for probably 3 or 4 weeks. I put a band together with Jersey musicians there. Great guys, great musicians. We rehearsed a little bit, and then we cut the album. And over the course of 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, we did the Fugitive Kind album. And Donna came in and sang background on a couple of songs. Joe and Eddie came in and sang background on a couple of songs, and that was how that happened. But the difference, one of the differences just in studio situations, I tell this story. When I first started as an artist and started writing songs, I had nothing to record on. I would sing the song, in my mother's basement, as a teenager, writing a song. I remember my father like stomping the floor to get me to stop at 3 o'clock in the morning. But here I am writing a song, and the only way that I can remember it is to do it so many times that I can't forget it. So now you have everything to record on and remember stuff. So but I'm sure about the time of The Fugitive Kind, I had there was a Walkman and a cassette recorder that I had sitting on my Fender Rhodes so I could record things and remember them. But early on, there was no such luxury. So
you also mentioned in one of the other interviews, you talked about the Bad Girls album, which I mean that to now listen to the whole thing, and I don't think I've ever done that because I'm trying to get through as many of the just as a marker, the Rolling Stone 500 greatest. I'm like, okay, well, it's not definitive, but you're going to get a lot of good ones in that list. And I see it's in the list. So, okay, that's a must listen. You noted the engineering on it. It's a two-part question. How do you know, as you're putting an album together, that it's being engineered properly? Like, and you're working with a good engineer, but when do you know, like, okay, this sounds good? And the second part is, was there ever a peak point? We talk about the glory days of recording. Was that necessarily the case as you see it? Better now? How would you say?
Well, you're asking an old guy about an old time, and I am somebody who resists saying this was better then and that was better and that because I think there are great things happening all the time, but I will certainly say that, that was a special moment in time in terms of engineering, because it was a transitionary time. Recording had grown and grown and grown, and Bad Girls came at a time when it was just at the beginning of the digital age. And we were recording, running analog machines and digital machines at the same time, and finding ways to sync them, and synthesizers were in their first few years of coming into prominence. So there was a lot of things going on. So you had the old school recording techniques, you had the modern element of digital, and as it applies to Bad Girls, I always give props to who I consider the underrated person in a great team is Jürgen Koppers, the engineer, who was a great recording engineer, as was Bruce Sudano, Quincy's engineer. These are guys who came through the old school system, but were in the moment of making these transitions, and were educated both knowledge and ear-wise in being able to make the transition and incorporate the digital at the same time. So, a record like Bad Girls has the benefit of all of that. It is sonically punchy, powerful, clean, and warm. It encompasses it all, in my estimation.
I'm looking forward to giving it a listen. I got some nice noise canceling headphones at home, and I love listening to good albums through that. And so I am even more interested to give every track. That's the thing. I mean, the hits, yes, we know. We play them on our radio station right here, but all the tracks will be good to hear. Before I let you go, what's the next project you have in mind?
Well, coming up next for me, the immediate thing is I've just shot a video for a song off Talkin Ugly Truth. It's called How'd You Get Here? And that will come out March 1st. I'm in the realm of I go back to Italy in a couple of weeks. I have a run of shows there. I have an Italian band which comprises a bassist, a percussionist, and a cello, along with myself on acoustic guitar. And so I'm going to be doing some recording with the Italian band. Right now, the only recording that I've done with them that is viable and on Spotify is my version of Bad Girls. So I'm going to be doing some more recording with them. And and I have a bunch of shows booked for Italy and Europe over the next 3 months. So at the same time, I continue to write and prepare for the next album. And I'm in the early stages of composing for that. So that's all I got.
That's good. And there's going to be plenty more. That's good to hear. Bruce, thank you for the chat today. This is very insightful. Learned a whole lot about this. This is really cool. So thank you for that. Good job on the most recent releases. So Prisoner of Reality, that came out later. I was meaning to ask about that. So
yeah,
why did that come out a little later than the rest of the album?
Well, okay, that there you go. So there are a number of songs that along the way I write and record that don't make it onto the recordings. Mm-hmm. So this very well maybe we're in the talking stages of putting together an album. So of these particular songs, which Prisoner of Reality was one. Prisoner of Reality was a song I wrote and recorded 3 or 4 years ago. Didn't make it onto the album. There's another song I just put out, My Blonde Italian Girl. That was something that I wrote and recorded and didn't put it on a record. So there are a number of these songs. Another one is coming out. It's called No Surprise. That is coming out April 15th, I think is the day. So the next album may very well be a number of these songs that weren't included on albums, including Prisoner of Reality, My Blonde Italian Girl, Bad Girls. My version was never on an album. And I may do 3 or 4 new songs with a bunch of those songs. May very well be the next project, probably come out over the summer.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, now we know even a little bit more of what's to come. Awesome. Thank you so very
Thank you,
much, Bruce,
man.
for all this. All the best.
Appreciate it.
Be listening for more. Take care.
Okay, talk again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.